All right. Well, the audio is working, so I guess we can get started. Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Porat on the Ramble podcast, where we do just that. We ramble and talk about randomness. And today, I have a good friend of mine joining me, goes by the name of Natso, and we are going to be discussing something that we both find very interesting, which is the Three Body Problem book series, as well as the Netflix adaptation that was released just a couple months ago. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Natso. How are you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm pretty excited that we're finally doing this because
Yeah, it's been
it's
forever, right?
it's been forever. It feels like it's been forever. Scheduling
Yeah,
conflicts and everything. So now we're finally here, and we've. I think it was a couple months back. That's when we both found out that we had read the books. I think.
yeah. I think it was it the fall semester, the class in experience architecture
I think it
that we,
was.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember that because we got very excited,
Oh
obviously,
yeah,
and we just started talking about it, and then we were talking about the show, which we'll finally be talking about here, and
yeah.
talking about what we expected. Because that is the weird thing with this, is that there are technically already other adaptations of the Three Body Problem. Um, I have not
hmm
watched the other one, the other live action one.
Yeah. Oh, the 10 cent
Yeah, the
version.
10-cent
Okay,
one.
okay.
I have
Uh-huh.
not watched it. I know it has many more episodes. I think around 20 or something.
Oh, I think it's even like 30 or something.
Oh my
Really,
god, really?
they really stretched it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because that's in stark contrast to the Netflix model, which is very rigid on like its 8 episode
Oh
format.
yeah. hmm
So we can get into that later. Yeah, but before we get into any of that, I guess we'll start with the books. And let me ask you, when did you first read the books, and what was that kind of like for you?
Oh, sure. I think it would have to be 2018, 2017, somewhere around then. I
Hmm.
was doing my master's in creative writing uh, in Philadelphia at Temple University. I'm a professor at UPenn. Uh, was in a get together, a social get together that I was at, and he just recommended me the book, and he just raved about it, and he mentioned that the setting was in Inner Mongolia, and
Mhm.
as a Mongolian, I was like, okay, maybe interesting. And I think then there was another article about maybe it was from Tor Books or the New Yorker, I don't know, or maybe the New York Times article. Um, I don't know. I'm mixing up a lot of things,
No, it's
but
okay.
this really cool article came out, and I happened to read it, and it said Barack Obama,
Oh
recommended
yeah.
it. The George R. R. Martin recommended it.
Mhm.
Mark Zuckerberg. A lot of people just like gave it a thumbs up. That was the book one, and so I thought, it might be interesting, and I just dove in and never looked back. I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
That's you put a lot of dramatic flair on that.
Yeah.
I
No.
like that.
I think it was, and I just couldn't stop. I mean, my wife can even attest to this, and many
Mm.
other people around me. I couldn't stop talking about it. Like I started learning Chinese, and like for Mongolians, learning Chinese is a pretty big like it's a big, I think, decision. I think.
Right.
because our cultures are very contrasting, and we sort of pride ourselves on some of the aspects about it. But then I think it opened a lot of the Chinese culture and language and history, and especially the scientific imagination to me. So yeah, it was really
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
No, I really like that you said that, and I think that that is why I'm so interested in talking to you specifically about this because you have a unique perspective on this story that I do not have, and that in of itself, I mean, we've already had discussions in person about this, and you've said things
Uh-huh.
that I would not even have thought of just based on our backgrounds and the different perspectives that you've had. So you've really made me kind of think about things. I mean, even just before we got on, we were we were having like a 10-minute conversation, and you were
Oh
saying
yeah.
things that really got me thinking. So,
Yeah. Well, I should probably preface this as well by saying that I'm not an Inner Mongolian.
mhm,
I'm a Mongolian. So I come from the country of Mongolia, which is right between Russia and China.
mhm,
The story is set in Inner Mongolia, which is an autonomous republic, and now it's part of China basically, and they
mhm,
have probably um, the most authentic um, take, and I think they have a very unique take as well because it's literally set in that um, place. And
mhm,
um, yeah, I've read almost all of the English translations of the Liu Cixin's books,
mhm.
except for the one that recently came out. I think it was called "The Hold Up the Sky" or something,
Oh,
um,
I didn't hear about that.
or the one with the whale song short story. Um, but I've read everything. It's really Liu Cixin's works are really good, and there are sometimes some characters who are from Xinjiang, Uyghur characters. Some characters are working in Tibet, and obviously there's the three body problem, which is set in Inner Mongolia. So there are
Mhm,
some like characters who are out and about in the I guess peripheral or provincial lands, discovering things and having adventures. And I don't know how to feel about it. Maybe we'll get into it in a bit, right? Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I think that is probably one of the more difficult things about this conversation is that there's a lot to talk about,
Oh yeah.
and we're not naive enough to think that we'll be able to cover everything. But I think we'll be able to get the ball rolling on a lot of things that we noticed and how that relates to some of our feelings about how the books were translated into the show and then just how they work as separate entities on their own, which is kind of hard because you can't in my opinion, I don't know how you feel about it, but you can't necessarily look at the show as a separate entity, mainly because it is an adaptation of a previous work. So as far
True.
removed as I
Hmm.
want to try to get from the books when I look at the show, there is that element where I am constantly comparing it and contrasting it to how it was portrayed in the books. Um, and I'm sure we can get into all of that as well.
Yeah,
And
definitely. Hmm.
well, I guess we can just do it right now. I feel like I keep building suspense. I
Dun,
guess I'll
dun,
just ask
dun.
then. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, let's go. Let's
Um,
do this.
let's do this. So I guess to just get the ball rolling, how did you feel about the show overall?
Wait a minute. Are we going to talk about when you read the books, or is it?
Oh, that's
Or
right.
is
I
it?
I
Sorry,
didn't even mention my. No, no, no,
I
no, no.
forgot
That's
to
okay.
reciprocate.
No, it's okay. I'm the
All right.
host. I should have remembered.
Um.
Um, yeah. Let me.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
it was more recent than when you had. I
Oh,
read
okay.
them. A friend of mine had been telling me about them when I was in undergrad, and he
Hmm.
was saying how he thought I would like them because I'm a big sci-fi fan,
Hmm.
and but most of the sci-fi that I've been exposed to was more American, and it had that kind of influence on it. So I hadn't read a lot of other foreign sci-fi experiences before. So I kind of wanted to try that from a different cultural perspective. And I on a whim. I think it was just last summer. On a whim, I just bought all 3 books on Amazon, and I just like you said, I never looked back. I sat down, and I think I read all 3 books in maybe 2 weeks, maybe. I mean, I just could not stop. Like, I was just I would even take breaks when I was reading them, and I would just sit there
Okay.
and I would take notes and write about it. And I must have annoyed my family because like you said, I was just talking about it constantly. And it actually has served to influence me for a lot of ideas that I have for books that I want to write in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. And it's not often that I read something or engage with a certain form of media that it impacts me so deeply like that.
Oh yes.
So
Mhm.
I was just I was kind of blindsided by that, and now we're here,
Yeah.
and,
I think yeah,
and
you really hit the nail on the head. It's really different from a lot of. I mean, as much as I love a lot of the U.S. Or North American, I'll say, sci-fi
mhm,
authors, it's very different. There's there's a little bit of everything. It's really like um, you can read it several times or think about it several times. There's a lot to unpack, right? Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
No, I agree, and I guess with that being said, I guess now we can truly get into it and just unpack this. So if you want to
Hmm.
start with your your perspective on how you felt about the show, I guess we'll go from there.
Oh, okay, okay. This show. All right. I think you know how there are like you know how there were like literary movements. There were like modernists,
Hmm.
postmodernists, and maybe like post whatever. I think I had a very mini. Um, I think the reaction audience has to highly anticipated media
Hmm.
can also have these little mini phases or uh, generations or mini generations or whatever. I
Hmm.
think in the beginning people were like really saying like, "Oh, please don't suck," you know, and then as soon as the show launched or released on Netflix, they were saying, "Oh, it's not as good," you know, some characters are dumb, like they
Hmm.
changed so much. I was very busy during that show, to be honest, so I couldn't. I mean, during that time, I couldn't just get out of my whatever I was doing. I couldn't
Hmm.
really watch the show, but I was sort of exposed to some reactions or reviews on social media and stuff
Hmm.
here and there, and then that sort of negative review I think sort of died down, and then there were people who were sort of afraid that the show would not be renewed at all.
Hmm.
So they were sort of trying to get more interest and saying like it's a good show, it's a good show. And I think that there are people also uh, who are genuinely being introduced to the three body universe for the first time. That is to say, they hadn't watched the Tencent version or
Hmm.
read the books. And I think for them as well, it was a really good show. So yeah, I think aware of both of that, ex-
Hmm.
both of these two extremes. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I've really, you know, like I don't have that naive, like really, um, uh, like very, I don't know, like I'm not concerned about the experience because I've been spoiled long time ago, right? Like those of us who've read the book, we know what's going to happen. We're always, as you
Right.
said, we're always, we can't help but compare it with the
Hmm.
novels, and like saying like, oh, why is there a difference?
Hmm.
What are the showrunners doing, or what are the
Hmm.
writers, show TV writers doing? What are the intentions, etc. And I think I used to think like TV shows literally just copied and pasted some dialogues into scripts and made adaptations
Right.
when it comes to like novel adaptations, but that is not the case. Uh, So I think I'm just curious. Like I think so far there are definitely some things that were like meh. I
Hmm.
think that it could have been done better, but in a lot of ways they've been pretty bold. In a lot of ways they've retained the core of the narrative arcs. So I think I'm just curious what happens next, and I'm also a little little bit afraid. I've been a little bit afraid that it wouldn't be picked up at all because, at least
Right.
on Twitter or social media, the reviews were not as big as I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's that was beautiful, by the way.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
yeah, thank you for that. That was really well said, and
All right.
I really appreciated the depth that you went into because there's a
Oh,
lot to
thanks, man.
unpack there.
Uh
Oh
huh.
yeah, anytime, man. And I I think I because I definitely know where you're coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and I think for me, when it comes to my perspective, is that I finished all three books right around the time when they first announced the show and showed the trailer, and that first trailer was pretty good. I
Yeah.
was actually I liked it because they had that what is it? They had that Carl Sagan quote in it, I think, where better not to know or something like that. I don't remember the quote exactly, but it was kind of
Oh,
chilling,
okay. Uh huh.
especially having read the books and knowing where it goes. I was liking some of the implications. But then I remember when they started releasing more stills and information about it, I started to realize that the main story was now almost being kind of retrofitted, and most of it was no longer taking place um, in Mongolia, but rather in the UK for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. And I was like, oh, that's okay. That's an interesting choice. I
Uh huh.
almost my gut reaction was that that feels kind of self defeating in a way because
Mm-hmm.
it almost seems to kind of go against the point. The point is that it originated and took place within that space in Mongolia, and now they kind of spread it over into the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering how they were going to tackle that. So I remember when it came out, and I came home and I sat down and I watched all 8 episodes, and I don't know whether or not that was a good or a bad idea that I watched them all back to back.
Uh huh.
Um, because they're pretty lengthy episodes. I think they're about some of them are a little over an hour. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was a lot to unpack. But so I went in. I definitely did not go into it wanting to hate it. I wanted to be as objective about it as I possibly could be,
Mm-hmm.
with the least amount of bias. But at the end of the day, there's always bias. Um, so I watched it, and I guess I would say I did fall somewhere in the middle to an extent. I think I had a bit more of a lukewarm reaction to it overall.
Uh huh.
And but I will say you said that they made some bold choices, and I think we can get into that stuff too because I agree to a certain extent, and I was actually surprised with some of the stuff that they were doing and willing to
Mm-hmm.
show,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the tanker scene with the nanofiber.
Uh huh.
Um, that
Oh yeah.
was
Oof.
I yeah, because I was wondering because in the books they don't necessarily. I mean, it's a book, so it's written
Mm-hmm.
form, but they don't
Uh-huh.
necessarily explicitly describe what's happening while it's happening. They basically, it's more that the character is hearing things happening off in the distance, and so it
Mm-hmm.
kind of alludes to it a bit more. But in the show, they just show you straight up what happens, and they follow visually with it, and they show the brutality and just the gore and of that. So that was interesting. And then you
Yeah.
also mentioned some
Mm-hmm.
of the reviews that happened
Mm-hmm.
earlier on too, and that's what was interesting to me because I definitely, if you look at like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that, obviously
Mm-hmm.
that's a bit more positive. And then in reviews like, I don't know, the New York Times and stuff like that, it was a bit more positive. And then the stuff
Mm-hmm.
that I saw was smaller YouTubers making reviews about it and social media seem to be more negative.
Yeah.
And there was one review, and I think that this will kind of maybe kind of help like stage some of the stuff that I might bring on later on.
Mhm.
But there was this one YouTuber, and he hated the show, and he had not read the books though, and
Oh.
he admitted that,
Uh-huh.
and I applaud him for admitting that,
Uh-huh.
because you don't necessarily have to read the books to
That is true. Yeah.
think the show is good, but he was
Hmm.
so filled with anger about it that he was calling it stupid and everything, and it was
Hmm.
interesting to me because a lot of the stuff that he wasn't liking, like, and we should probably preface that this is a spoiler review,
Oh
so we
yeah.
will
Yeah.
reveal. I'll put
Uh-huh.
that in the link on the video. But
Uh-huh.
he was mentioning, like, for example, the whole subplot with, I think in the show he's called Mike Evans. I think that's what they call him, the guy that gets cancer.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And he is the British equivalent of Tian Ming
Yeah. Yoon
from
Chang-min.
Death's
Uh-huh.
End.
Yep.
Yeah. And that is obviously another thing that we'll comment on is the fact
Hmm.
that the three body problem show does not just cover the first book, but it also takes elements from the other two books and puts them
Hmm.
in there.
Hmm.
And so this YouTuber was talking about that specific scene with the brain and how ridiculous it was and it didn't make sense. And I would
Uh-huh.
agree to an extent that in the show, the way that
Hmm.
they portrayed in the show, it doesn't
Uh-huh.
make so much sense because they don't spend enough time explaining it.
Oh, sure.
In the book, he does nothing but explain everything, and
Yeah.
so he builds it up. And I think the Three Body Problem series, it's one of those series where there's a lot of absurd sci-fi stuff that happens in it. And if he didn't take the time to explain it and make it seem realistic, they wouldn't have worked. But the books do just that. They explain them very well. But I think what the show is lacking is that same level of explanation surrounding the logistics of everything. So some of their plans and things that they're aiming to accomplish come off a bit more illogical, I guess, in the show format, in my opinion.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just the strengths and weaknesses of the medium, right?
mhm,
In written prose, you can just deep deep dive deep into the interior world of characters and
mhm,
explore, make a lot of expositions about, the social structure and you know, whatever's culminated into where the story is going, right? Whereas
mhm,
in the screen, everything has to be either visual or it has to make sense logically and just have
right,
to be intuitable, right? And I think that's the same problem with I don't want to digress a lot, but
yeah.
the Foundation adaptation in Apple
Oh,
Plus,
yeah.
yeah,
I gotta watch that.
I watched some of the episodes of the first season only, but I think
Mhm,
I remember like Asimov was always about like explaining the society of that
right.
time, and he shifts across decades, centuries, right?
Mhm,
So each time he has to be very economic with his words and quickly create a scene in the reader's mind, create the exposition, set the character off onto his mission, and then move to the next era. And I
mhm,
think that's the same issue here. And even so, because they have, as you said, added the death sense stuff. And I think so they have a lot to do, and they also are trying to be very efficient with their story. Um, and one thing maybe I will also mention that I've observed is in the book, Death End, Yoon Tianmin is an office worker, not a teacher.
right.
He works at a civil aerospace technology company, so he's
Mhm,
more or less familiar with um, you know aerospace stuff. So he's not really
right,
alien to the notion of just like setting off, even if it ends up being just his brain, right?
right.
Um, I also realized that maybe the reason he was a teacher was a nod to Liu Cixin's another short story called "Village Teacher" because he's a very Will Downing is a very selfless character, and that sort of jives with his, um, I guess, unconditional love towards Xin Cheng or Jin Cheng in the
Yes,
show,
yeah, we
right?
can get into that later
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. So I think
um,
that, yeah, that was definitely a big change.
mhm.
And but I guess, like the scenes where he was imagining or seeing like these big paper boats, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Those were straight from the Death's End. I didn't realize. I thought they were just like going out off script, but then it
yeah.
was exactly in there as well. So,
Yep, the fairy tales and everything.
oh
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah, because I had just read like some bits and pieces of Death's End right before
Uh huh.
that,
Uh huh.
and I was surprised. I'm like, wow, they're presenting this stuff already. And
Yeah.
part of me, like you said in the beginning, is that when it comes to making an adaptation, you're not literally just taking the book and making that the script. You have to make changes because it's a different medium,
Yeah.
and I don't fault them necessarily for including that stuff earlier on. It's more so just how they presented it, and because there's a lot going on in the first season, and it's because they are adding in those other elements. And I feel like the 8 episode format was a bit of a detriment. I feel like they needed at least like I don't know, maybe 10 to 15,
Oh yeah.
maybe to
Yeah.
kind of just like take their time with everything.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. I think one more thing I'll just quickly add
yeah.
here is I liked some of the dialogues, especially around like recruiting this Will for the staircase project. I don't
Mhm, mhm.
think Wade's line, "He's our man because he's not our man," was in the novel, right? I mean, he's not in the. I mean, Wade is in there in that sense, but those stuff like that Wade's sort of risk taking, he's very like, I guess, audacious or brazen or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
He's is a very brilliant. He comes across as a very brilliant strategic thinker in the show, whereas in the book he's just maybe a very battle hardened, but a little rough, right,
Yeah.
uncouth person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think I like how they also added these little nuances of or little dilemmas into the show as well, right?
Mhm.
I don't think the book really focused on how the show how the like it's a bit of a game theory, right? Like, we're sending you a brain and we're hoping you'll pick it up, right? If you don't pick it up, that brain will be just, will be stranded or just keep floating in this deep space.
Mhm.
Um, if we don't send you a brain, you won't get to know how we think either, right?
Mhm.
That's your ceiling. Like, you see everything about us with the sophons, but you can't get into our brain. We'll
Mhm.
give it to you, but it'll come to you in 200 years or something, right? So
Mhm.
I think the show creators sort of unpacking that dynamic was just really interesting. I think I hadn't thought about it that much, but then
Mhm.
the show really made it like a thing. And then also when Wade sort of realizes the necessity to do the wall facer project
Mhm.
while talking about the staircase project. I mean, they've cut out a lot, but I think maybe.
Yeah.
But what do you think? I don't know. It's yeah.
I those are some good points, and those are actually some things I wanted to talk about
Oh,
with
okay. Uh huh.
Thomas Wade.
Uh huh.
So I'm glad that you brought him up because the way that he's portrayed in the show and in the books are wildly different.
Oh yeah.
Because in the books, um, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was prior CIA,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he got that position that he had that put him in charge of the staircase program. Whereas in the show, he's almost
Mhm.
treated like forgive the comparison, but they almost write him like he's Nick Fury for the Avengers, kind
Oh
of
yeah.
where he feels like he's this mysterious guy that is in charge of all of these resources. Um, and I kind of didn't like that they condensed all of that down into just one character because I wanted him to just be the guy that just does the staircase program. I wanted him to focus
Yeah.
on that. So then when
Uh-huh.
they try to add in like the wall, because the wall facer thing, which is one of my favorite storylines in these books,
Uh-huh.
they kind of just it comes out of nowhere in the show,
Yeah.
and they just immediately put it out there. And I don't like the fact that the reason I like in the books,
Uh-huh.
because three body problem, one of the big things is obviously um, that science is dead, essentially, and more
Right.
so than that, that science is almost seeming like it's magic because the Sophons are deceiving everybody around the world.
Mhm.
Um, and then in the Dark Forest, it's very much all about the Wallfacer project, and then in Death's End, very much about that's the interesting thing to me is like I would say the Three Body Problem, the first book, is more of just like a straight up thriller. It's kind of like a sci-fi thriller, I would say. And then
Yeah.
Dark Forest gets a bit more. It's still a sci-fi thriller, but there's more like political intrigue at that point. And then Death's End, in my opinion, is essentially just a cosmic love story, basically, like a tragic love story.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
because those two characters are so instrumental in what happened to the human race later on, and so having each book focus on those specific things allows them, in my opinion, it gives each of those concepts enough time to shine. And in the show, they decided to do the Wallfacer project and all of that while the staircase program is going on, and I felt like that kind of took away from the grandiose kind of implications of each one. Like I wanted to watch the Wallfacer project on its own and not be interjected with the staircase program, if that makes sense. I wanted them kind of separate. Um,
Yeah, I definitely agree. It was, I think, one of the scenes I remember recall often, is when Luoji in the book Dark Forest, when
mhm,
Luoji is sort of being taken away in these tunnels and then
mhm,
on a plane, and he's just so clueless, and then he gets like ushered hustled into the UN, and then
mhm,
off in the distance, the general secretary says his name, right? That's like,
mhm.
that was like an amazing. But then it was just very much rushed. I feel like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they kept that's the interesting thing to me is that they'll kind of almost verbatim copy certain things from the books, like basically because the guy I don't remember his name. I think his name is Sam Durand in the show. The guy that is the
Oh,
Luigi.
Saul.
Oh,
Oh,
Saul. Yeah,
yeah.
Saul
Hmm.
Durand. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and he basically I, I didn't catch it until the second viewing, but he
Uh-huh.
basically doesn't have much to do until like the last two episodes because throughout most of the show he's kind of just having like relationship issues with that one girl, the one that made the nanofiber stuff.
Yeah.
I don't remember her
um
name.
Augie
Augie,
Salazar,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, Augie. Um, but then once they use her up, they don't really know what to do with her. So she just kind of goes to, I think she goes to Mexico or something.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember. And then for most of the show after that, Saul just kind of hangs out with Will Downing while he's dying. Which I will admit, I like those scenes on their own. I like it. Almost played like an indie drama where like Saul is comforting his dying friend, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
I won't lie, the final scene between them when they're in the hospital bed and he has to click yes, he has to go through the different prompts. And every time Will clicks past one of the prompts to say yes to initiate the surgery, Saul basically is almost like trying to talk him out of it each time. And it's like a really effective emotional scene. Um, and then after that, for the next like two episodes or so, he becomes the Luo G character, but it felt like they didn't build up to that because until then, he was just kind of sitting around, getting high and drinking, and he was a womanizer, but he wasn't doing much else. And as
Yeah.
soon as I saw him, because I don't know if you did this, I think you probably
Hmm.
did, but when they introduce you to those five main characters, I was trying to see which one was going to become which character in the books later
Uh-huh.
on,
Uh-huh.
because some of them are kind of hybrid
Uh-huh.
of different characters. And as soon as they introduced that Saul Duran character, I knew he was going to be Luo G. I could just tell because
Uh-huh.
he's a womanizer and everything, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. Yeah, okay.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, and I one of the things I mentioned one of the things I meant when I said they made bold choices, I think with Saul,
Hmm.
it's such a different. There are several different changes with Saul, and I'm curious how it will develop because they haven't really gotten to the core of Dark Forest storyline.
Hmm.
Um, First off, in the first episode, I was just watching the first episode several times, and I noticed that uh, Saul actually got this really prestigious award, and he
Oh,
had a certificate in there. I don't know, I don't remember the name, like McDumphy Award or something. Basically, something that's given to undergrad physics students in the UK, I think.
oh,
And apparently, he got it for his dissertation, undergrad dissertation, on long distance communication using neutrinos. So,
oh,
so in the book, he's teaching what's called the cosmic sociology, right?
right.
And he's teaching undergrads, but he's not really like um, he hasn't really figured out he hasn't had the epiphany right on that starry night.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the reveal is definitely going to be different, and then we also
Yeah.
have to talk about the joke, uh, the
Oh,
very
yes, the
funny joke
joke.
that
Yes.
Yemin Jay says about Einstein. Um,
That actually made me laugh when I watched that.
really,
Yeah, well,
uh huh,
because it was just so the way that it was just played off. She just
uh
says it
huh,
so dry.
yeah.
So,
It's like, and I guess yeah, and she was, and I think they really wanted to lean into that, you know, everything is being heard and listened to. So, you
mhm.
know, well, I think the actress also really tried to really delivered it like well. I think if it was too if it was too like animated delivery,
Yeah.
Saul would probably have thought it wasn't actually it was just
Right.
a bad joke, right? She she delivered it so dry, as you said, that it must have been something. It must be a storage container for some storage for like a
Mhm.
little some hidden information. I think
Yeah,
that
some
was
concept. Mhm.
communicated. Also, another thing I really liked about the Dark Force or Loaji character arc is this literary character he's able to imagine and almost like
Yes.
hallucinate, right?
Yeah.
But then in the show, Saul is already entangled, or
Mhm.
he's in a relationship with Augie, right?
Mhm.
Or this uh, Wang Miao or whatever. Yeah, we know who we're talking
Yeah.
about. The nanofiber girl lady.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
think her name is Augie.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there is she gonna be that imagined character? Because
I've been wondering that.
yeah, they're sort of building it like Augie's the love of his life, right? So
Yeah.
what is Saul gonna do? Is he gonna like live alone in a villa in Switzerland with Augie, or what's gonna happen, right? Yeah.
I yeah, I've been wondering that because to me, I'll give the show credit is that it makes me interested to see where they go next in season two. Because, like you said, some of the stuff that they're changing is so instrumental to how they move forward in the books. So I'm
Mhm.
curious to see how they're going to substitute some of that stuff and how they're going to move forward. Because yeah, like, is he just going to live alone, or is he going to have what's his name, the guy that's played by Benedict Wong? Um,
Clarence, she right?
yes,
Clarence, yeah,
yes, his name is Clarence Sheen now. Yeah,
yeah.
I forgot about that. Um, that was an interesting change to me that they made him.
Yeah,
They made him British.
yeah,
And he has, and this is where I kind of felt kind of like it was almost like the Hollywood influence a little bit because some of the
uh-huh.
scenes that he had with his son, I felt like were not completely necessary because he goes home, his son happens to have a boyfriend, and they're trying to make their own business,
Oh yeah,
and then he's playing Mortal Kombat 10 on the and then there's like weird scenes with that, and that felt like something out of a completely different type of story. Like just moments like that. Um I get what they were trying to do, but then they just throw in like random stuff like that. But then I look at stuff like the joke, for example, and
uh-huh.
how chilling moments are like that, where I was actually starting to get kind of excited. And I'm like, okay, well, I obviously know where this is going, and I think they're handling it pretty well. Even down to the little detail of them showing the ant.
Oh
They show
yeah,
the ant
yeah,
and everything.
uh-huh.
I was like, I like that, and it's like for people like us who have read the books, we know how significant that is. And it's not drawing too much attention to itself. But then you have moments that feel like they're very Americanized, and it feels very Hollywood, where they have the and no offense against this actor, I don't know his name, but he played Samwell Tarly in Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He was my least favorite character, unfortunately, and it's not his fault. It's just the way that the character's written,
yeah,
because he's basically just there to make jokes the entire time.
yeah.
And I, my problem with that is like, because he's saying off like these non sequiturs and Marvel one liners, while truly horrific stuff is going on in this story. Because as we know, these books, they get increasingly darker,
Mhm.
and some truly horrendous uh, crimes against life happen to humanity, especially in Death's End. I mean, humanity goes through a lot,
Yeah,
and so to have a character like him just making light of everything in that situation, and he's making like boner comedy jokes, and I like it was just like it just felt kind of weird. I was like, and then the way he dies too is almost like comedic, kind of like it's
yeah.
obviously not played comedically, but it's like a flat shot on the camera, and then he just gets stabbed. And that girl that stabbed him, I thought they were gonna reveal that she was like a robot or something. Because the way that
Oh,
I thought they were I don't know why I thought that, but because the way she kills him, she displays like almost like superhuman strength. Because she
uh-huh,
like pushes him really hard um against the window, and then she just very easily kills him. And I'm like, oh, is she gonna be? Are they trying to say that instead of just one Sophon robot, which isn't supposed to come into play until like 200 years in the future, are they just gonna have a bunch of Sophon robots now? But no, I guess she's just human. So I guess I was wrong about that.
yeah. I think there was in the book there were these factions that either saw these Trisolarians as redeemers or even Advent or what it like they would just like there were redemptionists and Adventists, right? So I think
Yeah,
everything is just
yeah,
flattened, and then this Tatiana
yeah,
character that you mentioned,
yeah.
she's just like this one, maybe composite character of both Shin Yufei and Tang something. I'm blanking out on his name as well. The other guy,
Mhm,
um, who's like ready to get the world wiped out, get humanity wiped out, and the Trisolarians to live on Earth. Um,
mhm.
I think one thing I was before I watched the Netflix show and the Tencent version, I was one thing I was curious was the books were originally I mean the first book was originally written in 2005, and obviously we've had a lot of tech. Tech has
Right.
developed a lot after that.
Mhm.
So I was wondering how much the countdown in your eyeballs, or the whole initial, you know how the technology would age in the show. And I think the Netflix folks are sort of not confident about how they're trying to portray. Because, as you said, there's the Tatiana,
Yeah.
sort of, seemingly, stabbing Samuel Tarly with this
Mhm.
superhuman ability, but it doesn't show in later scenes. And also in the last scene of the last episode, Wade is sort of menaced by, or threatened by the Sophon,
Oh yeah,
with
that's
some
right.
like visions, right? Like scary,
Yeah.
terrifying visions. But like, what I was like, what? Why haven't this been introduced? Or could they do that?
Yeah.
I guess they were, and I think it was just like the showrunner saying, like, please renew us. We got so much more. I feel like, as we discussed this before,
Yeah.
right? Like they're just
Yeah.
building up a lot of things,
Yeah.
starting from like episode 6 or 7, right, for
Mhm.
the next season. So
Really fast too, because
yeah.
I think that's like, I think the difference, one of the biggest difference with the show and the books is that in the books the Sophons only want to, they want to manifest the identity of being omniscient and omnipotent, but they're not completely. They have a lot of power, but they're not all powerful, and but they want to manifest the persona that they are, because to humanity that's what's scary. And how else would humanity know? They wouldn't know any better.
Hmm.
At most, pretty much all the Sophons can do are disrupt the particle accelerators, because that was another thing that they don't really explain in the show too well, is that
Uh-huh.
they make it seem like they're just halting all science, and in the books it's very specifically particle accelerators, which makes it so they can't really develop like AI very well and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But in the show they're much more nebulous about it, which makes it confusing. And then you have the oh god, I hope I don't lose my train of thought. They have the aspect where um, in the show, the Sophons quite literally can almost do anything. And I
Hmm.
was starting to get a little like, I don't know, like they're almost too powerful in the show.
Hmm.
And in the books, it was much more feasible that they can see all these things and stuff like that, but they're not making the Onion Knight see nightmares on his private jet in the book.
Right.
And that just kind of, like you said, that felt like it came out of nowhere. So the rules are very, they're almost non-existent to an extent. It almost feels like they could do anything, which then makes the Trisolarans in the show not as threatening, because if they can do all these things yet still lose somehow, how advanced are they really? Whereas in the book, it makes sense. They play up that stuff very well. And that is another thing. We're calling them Trisolarans. In the show, they don't call them that.
Yeah.
They call them the Santi, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you feel about that? About the
I
kind of
think, well, I mean, it's okay, I guess. I mean, when you read it, I mean, in the prose, I think I prefer the Trisolarians because
a.
it's
Mhm.
much more descriptive, right? You got the
Mhm.
three three sons in there. But in,
Yeah.
like, just when I said the word earlier, I almost tripped over my mouth. Well, so I think Santi is fine, I guess. Yeah, but for folks who are not um, aware of the books or the Chinese
Right.
meaning, I think it's a little confusing. But yeah, it's. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I would agree on that. I would think that because that was one of the interesting changes that they made, and I was always wondering. Let me know if you thought this too, because I'm
Hmm.
curious what you
Hmm.
were thinking. I was curious if because in the book when Ye is at the Red Coast satellite,
Uh-huh.
Ye Wen J, is that, did I pronounce that right? I probably
Yeah,
did.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and when she is making contact with the Trisolarans, and in the book, it's wonderfully descriptive. She's talking about how they're sharing like information with each other, with the listener and everything. Um, and then the In the show, and this is where it gets kind of confusing to me, especially with her character, because
Uh-huh.
in the book, she's pretty clear on the fact that she believes humanity needs to just die off because of her. She's seen the worst of humanity based on
Yeah.
her past, and
Hmm.
she sees humanity as not worth saving at that point. So in the book, when the Trisolarian says, "Do not respond. We will come. We will conquer. Don't do it." Um, in the books, it's consistent with that. She realizes that she believes it. She never wanted to save humanity. She essentially was trying to punish the people that hurt her. And the almost ironic part of that is that most of those people are all dead already. So she's really just hurting future generations at that point, which is obviously a theme of the books, which is generational trauma and how that hurts other generations. But in the show, they do this weird thing, and I don't know if this was something that went wrong, maybe some mistranslation in the drafting period, but they present her and they present it like she doesn't want all of humanity to die. She thought that the Santi, Trisolarans, whatever you want to call them, she thought that they were going to come and make humans better, but still in the show, the Santi that she talks to, um, through the satellite tells her we're going to kill you all, don't respond. Yet later on in the show she seems surprised when she finds out that the Santi want to kill them all, like it's a revelation, but they told her in the beginning. So it's really weird how they play that up. But I was getting off track, I apologize. But
No worries.
what I was going to say is that I was curious if during that scene, because in the book that scene comes towards the end, because it's after they attack what's his name, Mike Evans.
Hmm.
They attack his boat and they get the data and they listen to the conversation. And in the book, he very slyly describes the Trisolaran from their perspective without really telling you what they look like. And so in the show, I was thinking, I'm like, well, it's a visual medium, and I'm wondering if they're just going to show what the Trisolarans look like. That would be a pretty bold move. But they don't do that. And I love that because I never want them to show the Trisolarans because I feel like that would just ruin the mystique and the mystery. But they almost do something that's kind of equivalent, where that one character who is kind of like the Shingzhen equivalent, she's in Three Body, was Sofon, and they quite literally show the actual Trisolaran fleet as it's leaving their planet to come invade Earth. Um, which was interesting because you can kind of make out what some of the ships look like if you kind of zoom
Oh
in a little
yeah.
bit.
Uh-huh.
And in the books, the only object or artifact of Trisolarans they ever describe is the teardrop.
Hmm.
Um, so I feel like that was kind of bold to just outright show what their ships look like, even if you can't really see them too well. But
Yeah. I think that's there were a lot of things that like the book was sort of nebulous about, or the book
mhm.
just straight up skipped, that were sort of picked up in the show. I guess they sort of, my understanding was they sort of tried to, pick whichever would be most translatable in the visual medium.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I mean, I was definitely not. I was impressed by the the script, how the interstellar communication went down.
Yeah.
Um, Essentially, Yewenje was punching in like these numeric on the numerical pad, right? Like
Mhm.
from 1 to 9 or 0. There was this numerical pad, and when you punch it, you create these Chinese characters. Because when I was reading the book at that scene, I was wondering like, how are they communicating with each other? And I guess it's like, I mean, even Liu Cixin didn't want to think about it, he just hand waved it, But
Mhm.
I think that I don't know. It was a good. It seemed to make sense in that at the time anyway.
Mhm.
But yeah, you're right. I think there were some improvements in the character arc of Ye Wenjie. Ye Wenjie
Mhm.
definitely was very uh like very begrudging, and I think she just wanted the world to have another leaders or overlords, right? When she
Yeah.
told them, and I think I don't remember the exact line either, but I think in the books, in the first book, she says, "Come and fix it for us," or yeah, come and like rectify it, or and the
Yeah, something
implication,
like that.
yeah, the
Yeah.
implication being just like you feel free to wipe us out,
Yeah.
and settle up in our settle down in our planet or something.
Mhm.
But yeah, the show gives Yewinje more moral high ground, if that makes sense. There's these things about like her and Mike Evans's
Mhm.
daughter who commits suicide in the
Oh,
beginning, right?
yeah.
Vera, yeah, I think her name is.
Yeah.
Like it's very different from the show, and I think there were some
Yeah.
reactions from uh, the Chinese
Mhm.
readers and viewers complaining like, why does uh, what was it? Why does a Chinese character have to have a white man to save her all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah,
Yeah.
I get that, but I think it also has to do with like making sure the story is global, right? It's
Yeah.
Earth responding to characters, and I think for that end, they created they use use this as a means. I think, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Did I mention that? I think now I'm realizing we could have talked about that Mongolian territorial aspect
Oh,
that
yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
discussed before the show.
Yeah.
Maybe I can talk a little bit about it, or maybe I can start with the mention of Thomas Wade's 1% Mongolianness, right
Yes.
in
Yes.
episode 3 or something.
Yeah.
Um, so in the show, Thomas Wade, or the Onion Knight, he says he says he did his DNA ancestry thing, testing thing, and he's 1% Mongolian. And then actually, Jin Chen, and Samuel Tarley, I can't still, Jack,
Oh, Jack. Yeah,
Jack
he
is
has
his
such an
name.
easy name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jack
Jack. I
Snacks.
always
Yeah,
forget it.
or
Yeah,
yeah.
Jack Snacks. Yeah.
They go to Xanadu or Shandol, which is this summer palace of Kublai Khan or Kublai Khan, as dreamed up by Samuel Taylor Coleridge,
Mhm.
an English poet of the Renaissance era. Um, and there's a lot of like Mongolian uh, theme popping up in that episode, and I wanted to like talk about it. So
Mhm.
first of all, in the book Dark Forest, I think it's when. So it's definitely, I think it's mentioned in Dark Forest, right, in the second book.
Mhm.
They're talking about maybe related to the first battle. Let's just say I don't want to spoil it too much, or maybe a lot of
I
people will
think
know
that's
it.
Death's End. Are you talking
Or
about the beginning when
oh
they do the flashback
oh,
or
I meant the teardrop. So
Oh, yes,
that's
that
what I'm.
is Dark Forest. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So somebody talks about how when Sung Dynasty designed this new weapon that launched spears,
Mm-hmm.
it was still ineffective against the Mongol cavalry, because even though the spears were big, it made aiming very slow. Right, it was
Mm-hmm.
literally this big cart, and Mongol cavalry could just like get out of the way or just ride away,
Hmm.
and it made them very mobile and hard to aim at. Um, that I think was. that mention of that was maybe translated to the show as that, I think, or whatever that was, um, because, and I don't know. So I don't know what my thesis is yet, but basically, let me just say, um, it is. So there's two aspects to that. One,
Mhm.
China likes to, because Inner Mongolia is part of China. China
Mhm.
likes to also say, Yuan dynasty. Yuan is a Chinese dynasty, even though the king Kublai was a Mongolian.
Mhm.
Um, whereas we Mongolians like to say Yuan was a successor of the Mongol or Mongol Empire. I'm not too big on like the medieval history. It's not. Some Mongolians really are like avid fans of the Mongolian history. I think we should sort of let it go. Don't not take it too seriously. But there were some territorial things that the Chinese have been doing historically, and I think it's
Mhm.
called like military history. So
Yeah,
yeah,
propaganda and all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And
So
yeah.
basically, what happens is Mongols and proto-Mongols have historically had, because of their nomadic civilization or lifestyle, written record has been very hard to be retained by them. Like they didn't have a lot of good uh, storage facilities, let's just say, right? And
Mhm.
because of that, Chinese historical records have always weathered well in the annals of time, and
Mhm.
Chinese people or historians were fully aware of that, and they usually sort of became took the long-term expansionist move along that uh, avenue. So basically, um, that actually there's a very big example of that in the show. So in the book, the Three Body Problem, the first book, um,
Mhm.
the the scene that starts in Inner Mongolia is happening in the Greater Hingang mountain range,
Mhm.
mm, or Da Hingang range, I guess. And that was originally associated with like Hyambe or Hya people or Hitang people. Uh, and uh, after Yuan, Ming more or less, pushed out the Mongols to their northern frontier, and the Darhingan mountain range, where the Red Coast is based,
Mhm.
is not part of the Ming territory. So in the book, I have highlighted that. Let me see if I can see that. So in the book, this character says, very early in the book says, uh, when this tree was but a shrub, it was still the Ming Dynasty, right? They're talking about
Mhm.
the trees they're cutting down and looking at the rings and saying, oh, this is how old they are based on the rings they have. Um, but in the show, there's like a love scene between Yerinje and Mianbai, something like another character, right? The bespectacled character. He
Mhm.
says when this tree was a shrub, uh, the Ming Emperor touched it or something. So that's sort of hinting very indirectly that the Hingang area, where the Red Coast is based, used to be part of the Ming territory, right? Which
Mhm.
is this military. It's kind of like a military history move, and I, as much as I love Yu Shin, I mean these kinds of things kind of infuriate me because, like, um, it's sort of. I mean, it is. I think in a way, it's uh, maybe making Mongolian history a little more um, known, but also saying that um, the Hinlang or Heilongjiang was already part of. I think it's like retro owning. I don't know. Is that a
Mhm.
word? Just pushing
I
that. Yeah,
you could coin that. Yeah. I mean, I know what you mean though when you say
yeah.
it. Yeah.
But that being said, the second thing I wanted to talk about Wade's 1% Mongolianness is it. I think it could be. I mean, it might sound. I mean, obviously, like a lot of people might say, just oh, there's no way an Irishman is 1% Mongolian because he's got a really thick Irish accent, right?
He does. Yeah. I think his
Yeah,
name's like Liam Cunningham or
yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
That's
Yeah.
his name.
Yeah.
Um, but the during the Mongolian uh, army's conquest in the west in the Eastern Europe, there
Mhm.
is said to have been an Englishman translating for them.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a record of that. Um, and also during Kublai Khan's time, Marco Polo. So this is something I learned when the makers of Marco Polo,
Mhm.
the Netflix show, came to Mongolia
Right.
because we were like excited, like somebody's making a show about our Khan and stuff,
Uh,
or this character. And a lot of people, especially in China, say Marco Polo didn't exist or didn't actually come all the way here. But I remember
mhm.
reading Marco Polo's one of the folios of Marco Polo and catching a lot of Mongolian words. So I think I'm at
Mhm.
least more or less convinced that he was in contact with Mongolians at least during
Mhm.
the Kublai Khan's court. Um, when Marco Polo eventually returned to Venice, he had a Mongolian servant. Some people say servant, some people say butler or even slave.
Mhm.
And I wondered if somebody should make a show or if the Marco Polo, future seasons of Marco Polo would mention him. And I asked the show creator, John Fusco, when he was in Mongolia, like, oh, I read that when Marco Polo returned, he had a Mongolian butler. Is it true? Do you think you guys are going to include it? And he said, yeah, his name is Peter. So apparently, and he died like he lived long. He lived a long age in Venice or Italy.
Oh.
So that was so cool. But unfortunately, Marco Polo didn't go past season two. It was a good show, but
Yeah.
um, so they never they never covered Peter. But maybe this Peter person, who's a real historical character, I think, um, made some babies, and their babies' descendants moved westwards and eventually settled on the Emerald Isle. We don't know.
Mhm.
You never
Yeah.
know.
We don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So those
We
are the
don't know.
two things I wanted to mention about that. Uh,
Mhm.
the 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 background ethnicity of the characters. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that, by the way, because
Oh,
that's
sure.
one of the
Thank you.
reasons
Yeah.
why I'm so glad that I got to talk to you about this because that's stuff that I was kind of ignorant on, and so having you explain that was fascinating to hear. And I think at the core of kind of what you were talking about too, with like that territorial stuff and the idea of propaganda
Uh huh.
and
Yeah.
propagation of propaganda in society, which I think is it's a big theme of the books, which is propaganda control and what that looks like for each side, because there are commonalities between the Trisolarans and our own history as well,
Hmm.
um, and how that informs a culture. Whereas with the Trisolarans, they're almost, by comparison to us, they're almost portrayed as being harsh in a way.
Hmm.
But when you take into account how their species evolved, where they've known nothing but hardship, where entire civilizations are literally just snuffed out because of the erratic behavior of their star systems. And then with humans, we've never really had calamities such as that. So we were allowed to grow and to build more differentiated cultures, whereas Trisolarans seem to only have the one culture, which is survival,
Right.
survival of the whole. Whereas humans are survival of our nation, not the whole. Because humans are still very nationalistic, they're very patriotic when it comes down to it. Um, and so that division plays into the books, obviously, and I think even a little bit in the show too, where they probably haven't gotten into it too much, but I'm curious to see where they go. Um, and I'm curious to see how sci-fi they will get with the second season in terms of, are they going to do that time jump maybe halfway through that season, or are they going to wait until the end? Are they going to touch more on some of the stuff that you were just talking about? And specifically, there's that scene in Death's End which literally takes place, I think it's in Constantinople
Oh yeah.
in the beginning.
Uh-huh.
And I remember reading that the first time, and I was just so confused. I said, "Well, what does this have to do with anything?" And I'm like, "What? Like, what is it? Like, she did magic?" I'm like, "What? This doesn't make any sense." And then, but obviously, like because I read the other two, I'm like, okay, well, he put that there for a reason. Like, this will be explained later on, and it is. It has not only a cultural implication, but an actual like scientific implication. Um, and I'm curious if they're going to do stuff like that in the show as well, like introduce aspects like that. And I don't expect them to cover the Redemption of Time spin-off fan fiction novel.
Uh-huh.
I don't expect them to cover that because in that book, that goes much more into depth with the more fantasy aspects of Three Body. Um,
Oh yeah.
did you read that? I
Yeah,
think we've
yeah.
yeah yeah. Um,
I think yeah, I we I think if they show the aliens, if they show how the Santi looks like, that's the main contribution from the redemption of time. I think everything else, and maybe the uh, I don't know. I think we're gonna spoil the redemption of time again as
yeah.
well. But the way the universe existed before this
Mm,
fall of thing happened. Two things I think that were really interesting from that book was one, how the Trisolarians actually looked like, uh, you know,
mhm.
those things. Um, I still feel bad to just spoil things. I don't know. Maybe folks who are listening will already have read the Redemption of Time.
Yeah,
And the
maybe.
second one is, of course, um, how the dimensions that we
Mhm,
have, or the particles that we have in this current universe, uh, is just there's. If we look on a really micro level, there are these nubs of other higher dimensions that just burnt. Right? It was such a weird concept. Like
yeah.
when there were like 10 dimensions, and then these weapons were deployed to you know
Mhm,
uh, burn off these dimensions one by one, and now we only
mhm,
have like 3 dimensions, and everything else is just a numb. That's why they're micro, only
mhm,
accessible in micro. Like that was such a mind-blowing thing. Like
mhm.
but otherwise I think the skewing into more anime or manga or
Yeah.
that aspect, I didn't like that. I mean, it just totally
No, no. Like, he's a superhero, and
yeah.
he's flying through space, and
Yeah.
I I give him credit for I won't explain how he describes what the Trisolarans look like. If anybody
Uh-huh.
is curious,
Uh-huh.
you can
Oh
look it
yeah.
up on your own.
Uh-huh.
But I will say is that it's bold for
Mm-hmm.
him to do it the way that he did.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I personally like his explanation of what they look like. I don't think I ever wanted an explanation because I think that kind of takes away from how mysterious they are. I think it was interesting in the moment when he explains it
Uh-huh.
in the spinoff. It brings up a lot of logistical concerns for me in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how they could appropriately develop and wage war on a species like us, um, but at the same time, that's not fully canon as far as I know. So if you don't want to believe that's what they look like, you don't have to. Um,
Yeah.
So I guess it really just depends on what people. But it was a bold choice
It
and it was
was,
creative. So I
yeah.
give it credit for that.
And at the risk of like slightly spoiling as well, like it sort of jives with some of the things that were mentioned, and I think you maybe Liu definitely praised this fan fiction, and I don't know if he actually said it was canon or not, but maybe he just felt, you know, he wanted to show his appreciation to his fan.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely, I would have, uh, I think, but I think I think I know where Baoshi, or this fan author, is coming
Mhm.
from, because in other, um, some of the other short stories that Liu has written mentions creatures that are very similar to both Trisolarians
Mhm.
and Sophons.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, is it Wandering Earth? It's either, so there are different story collections, short story
Mhm.
collections. Wandering Earth, The Hold of the Sky.
The lightning bolt,
No, Lightning Bulb.
or
Yeah, Lightning Bulb has a reference to. It's almost like a prequel to Three Body.
oh,
Yeah, because it. Yeah, he says it's supposed to be a prequel.
oh, I
Yeah,
gotta read that then.
yeah. Oh, yeah. It's Lightning Ball is really good, and also to what you said about like uh, this propaganda and different
Mhm.
nationality things. Um, his novel Supernova Era, the Supernova Era,
Ah,
is really interesting, and it really talks about how I think it's like a great piece of work in uh, like in terms of sociological aspect as well,
mhm.
because also without spoiling a lot, or let me just tell you the main premise. Okay, I think the
Yeah,
premise
please
is fine,
do.
right?
I'm curious.
So there's a supernova in the vicinity of our stellar cluster,
Mhm.
and the world, the Earth, is just bombarded by radiation.
Mhm.
Everyone above like 17 are gonna die very soon because their DNA can't repair itself from the damage sustained from the radiation.
Oh,
So it becomes very apparent that the whole world is gonna die, except everyone under 17 years of age, or 14 or 15 or whatever. So
mhm.
each government of the world starts to recruit these children, and essentially teaches them, trains them to run the country, run the society, right?
Mhm.
And these kids um, are sort of babysat by an AI, and then what's really interesting out of, like, there are a lot of like imaginative technological visions, really exciting stuff in terms of like tech sci-fi, but the
Mhm.
sociological aspect that's really interesting to me is when the old people die off, right? Only the young remains, and the initial assumption would be like there wouldn't be any war, right? The
Mhm.
young people are not necessarily racist or xenophobic or, you know, nationalist or whatever,
Mhm.
but it happens. There are wars, but not for the reasons you might think, and that's what makes it so interesting. And there's, at the end, the final uh, story beat is just something mind blowing. It's not really grand. It's kind of simple, but it's kind of silly, and something.
Oh, okay.
It's, yeah, I don't know, but definitely he, I think, talks about like this sociological, societal speculations a lot, and that's something I appreciate about him
Yes.
as well. Yeah,
Mhm.
he. I think one of the reasons why the three body problem became so large, had a large following around the world, is because the characters um, aren't necessarily like nationalistic, right? They just think about the humanity as a whole, like as you said, right?
Mhm.
So uh, I think that's what's really um, noble about him. And I think I read his essay where Liu Cixin said the new Chinese sci-fi should not be nationalistic. It should be, excuse me, if you want to get more, readers, you have to think about humanity, right? Not think about just
Oh,
one nation or region or whatever.
mhm.
And I think that's a very grand gesture. But there's one ramification that's a little dark, I guess, which is that he essentially says countries with fewer people or smaller population should not have an equal stand in like international treaties, should not have an equal
Oh,
stand as large countries. And I guess I see where they're coming from, but there's
right.
it's definitely like a skewed, it wouldn't be a democracy. It's a very skewed thing. I don't know, but it's very fascinating as well.
Hmm.
And then I think we were talking about the hybridity being uh, an interesting aspect as well in the novel, right? I mentioned it to you over chat. Um,
Yes.
so basically, uh, what I was thinking about was, how when the blue space or one of these spaceships are in deep space, they get a long delayed message about uh, either the Earth or the Tristellarian world being like from either the Earth or the Tristellarians, where it's revealed that Tristellarians have had a technological explosion after
Oh,
being
yeah.
after being
Yeah.
exposed to like humanity, right?
Hmm.
They're now able to lie, they're now able to create stories, theater,
Hmm.
and movies and stuff. Yeah.
They even made movies to show at the Oscars on on Earth. I That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts. They
Yeah.
don't spend too much time on that, but they
Uh-huh.
just kind of say like, "Oh yeah, they directed some movies."
Yeah. And I think, and also like when Luoji is wakened from a deep cryogenic sleep in Dark Forest, I think, or maybe it's Chenxing. I'm mixing them up. But basically, when somebody wakes up from a cryogenic sleep in the future, there's people speaking a mix of Chinese and English,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's Luo G.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So those two things, the mix, this hybridity of the Trisolarans and
Mhm.
the hybridity of this future Chinese society, made me think of Hami Baba's hybridity, right, as a literary theory or concept, where
Oh yeah,
um,
you mentioned this.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think uh, it definitely should be uh, analyzed more. But so Hami Baba's hybridity theory essentially says it's about like colonial power. I think he specifically meant it as the British colonial influence over the Indian society.
Oh, okay.
And hybridity, he says, is essentially the sign of the productivity of colonial power, right? How productive, how hybrid the society is correlates with how productive the colonial overlords or the the rulers are. So in a way, I think if we follow the Baba's theory, we have also like um, given the Trisolarians a lot of stuff. I think, right?
Yeah.
It's whereas we don't I mean, I think, yeah, I don't know, maybe I can't synthesize my thoughts better, but I feel like
No, that's okay.
the Santi, I'll just say Santi
Yeah.
are trying to like limit our growth, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
they're having their own like explosion of technology.
Right.
So who's more hybrid, right? That begs the question: who's more hybrid? Is
Oh
it the
man,
Santi or the humanity? Stuff like that. What do you think? What?
that's a
Uh
good
huh.
question. I I guess I'm almost more inclined to say humanity, just
Hmm.
because Santi or the Trisolarans, they have a much more unified type of culture.
Hmm.
Which is, like I said, it's their culture is survival. It's not living; it's survival
Hmm.
because of how harsh their upbringing is. And on Earth, we have so many different. I mean, this we don't know. That's the thing with the Trisolarans is that we don't know too much about their culture.
Right.
We're given just enough, but
Hmm.
my assumption is that they only have like one unifying kind of government because of where they are on the technological scale.
Hmm.
And with humanity, we're so separated by different nations already. So we have a lot of different dissenting opinions that feed into um, our choice making and stuff like that. Um, the hierarchy is not as well defined with humanity, I think. So I think that alone leads me to believe that humanity has more hybridity within it compared to the Santi. Um, I don't know. That's a good question, though.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a great take as well. Yeah, I think we should definitely dig deeper into this concept and maybe write a paper.
yeah, I would love to look into that more because I that's a concept that I need to become more familiar with. I think a lot of this stuff is because even like I was kind of unaware of cosmic sociology before I read The Dark Forest.
Uh huh.
So I had not really understand. I didn't really understand that when it was introduced in Dark Forest. I knew what the Dark Forest theory was loosely.
Hmm.
Um, I know that it's it's similarities to like the Fermi paradox. Essentially, it's an answer to that. But I think the way that he details it in the Dark Forest is so fascinating to me because he basically creates his own mythology.
Oh
He
yes.
creates his like for the universe essentially.
Uh huh.
Um, that being that, and that I think to me that's an interesting thing to kind of dive into, which is inherent inherent scientific and cultural rules that not only humanity follows but also the universe itself. Where with the dark forest, because the dark forest theory is all rules basically, which is
Hmm.
that if you are an advanced species and you reach a certain level, you start to realize what the truth of the universe is, which is that um, the universe has been degrading and it's continuing to degrade as it goes into lower dimensions. And not only that, but the universe is filled with alien life. And part of the reason that we have not run into them is because either we are afraid, so we hide, and we either do like we develop faster than light travel, or we do a black domain. Which the black domain theory was new to me. That was very interesting. Um, the idea of essentially creating isn't the idea like you create a black hole around your solar system to insulate it from the outside?
Yeah, I didn't get that. I didn't understand those things
Yeah.
either. It's it's definitely very high level stuff. But I think you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
creating like a black hole uh, horizon or something
Yeah.
right around it, so that
Yeah, something like
yeah.
that. And like all these rules that life understands at a certain point in their evolution. And I think that's why Death's End is actually kind of it has a beautiful ending because after everything that has gone wrong, after everything that humanity has gone through, when Shanxin and I forget the guy's name. Um,
Yun Tianmin.
no, she's with. Oh, I think it's Guan Yifan or
Oh,
Guan
okay,
Yifan.
okay,
Yeah,
uh
I
huh,
think it's after they leave the interdimensional uh, box that they were in
okay,
that
uh huh.
Tianmin gave them.
Hmm.
And they come out and because obviously time moves differently, so I think they're like at that point, I think they're like a billion or 2 billion years in the future or something
Oh,
like
right,
that.
yeah, yeah, I remember. Uh huh.
Which is so mind blowing. And
Yeah.
so after everything you've learned up to that point, the way he describes it, he describes the universe kind of beautifully. How it's like degrading and everything and stuff like that, and it looks different to them, and the stars and everything look different. Like nothing really looks the same because it's 2 billion years in the future. And it ends kind of on a beautiful note where they're seeing if they can get any signals from space, and at first nothing is picking up. And then out of nowhere, they realize that not only are humans still alive, but Trisolarans are too. And it seems that Trisolarans and humans are actually unified 2 billion years in the future. And to me, because they don't directly state that's what it means, but they allude to it. And the fact that after everything those two species have been through, the fact that you could be 2 billion years in the future, and it basically says that they are working together and prospering still, is kind of beautiful in
Yeah.
a way. And then they sail off into basically into the unknown, and you're kind of left wondering what happens until you read the Redemption of Time, and then it kind of, whether you like it or not, I'm not necessarily, I don't like it as actual canonized storytelling of the original trilogy. I kind of like it more as like a curiosity on the side
Oh,
kind
sure.
of thing. Um, but there are still some interesting ideas in that. Like they kind of flesh out that one alien race with the one character called the Singer,
Uh huh.
where they have like those. Because I think that there was a discrepancy. I think where in Death's End, I've read this online where when humanity gets the paper slip,
Uh huh.
um, I guess there is a discrepancy in that or an inconsistency where people say that's not the one that was sent by Singer. It was another race because of like time dilation and something didn't line up. So some people don't know if that was a mistake on the author's half or if people are just reading into it too much. Um,
I
I think people might just be reading into it too much, but
I don't, honestly, I think I didn't read uh, the Death's End middle, and I just read like beginning of the Death's End a little,
oh,
and
okay.
I read Death's End so long ago that I don't remember. I don't remember the ending, and I don't. I don't remember. I think I understood little. I really should read it again.
Mhm.
I think I understood very little,
Yeah.
especially like the part. But I think it was the lurker, right? I think the
Oh
guy
yeah,
that did is like he always keeps repeating like gotta hide, gotta like he has this repetitive.
that's in Redemption of Time, right? Because I don't think they mentioned the lurker in Death's End.
No, I think it is in Death's End. I
Oh,
think
do
yeah,
they?
I think
Oh shit, maybe I should reread
because
it too.
yeah, because somebody gets an like a objectoid that's coming in. So or maybe it's well, okay, whichever. Maybe it's in Dark Forest. Wait, which I'm mixing these things up. In which book does the flattening happen? Death's End, right? Or is
That's Death's End.
Death's End?
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah,
think the guy that gives gives the weapon, like the deploys the weapon against the Earth, or the alien that does that,
yeah. Singer.
launches the.
Yeah.
Oh, was it the Singer? I thought it was the Lurker, or maybe.
No.
Okay, then
Yeah.
I'm really mixing them
Yeah,
up.
no, it's okay. There's a lot to remember.
Yeah. Then Lurker must be the alien in the Redemption of Time. I distinctly remember some character named Lurker, and then there was
Yeah,
a.
he's in Redemption of Time. Yeah,
Okay,
that's the because in Redemption of Time, it's almost like it's almost analogous to like Christianity
yeah, oh
because you
yeah,
have there's the lurker, which is essentially resembling Satan,
yeah,
and
Lucifer.
how in the original 10th dimension, the lurker was the one that I don't know. I guess you could. It has allusions to like the Garden of Eden and like plunging things into chaos. And I don't
Oh,
remember what they call the other entity, but that one is obviously the god
yeah,
kind of like conduit. I don't remember what they call it though.
yeah, like a Edenic world. I don't
Yeah,
something. I don't know. I don't remember either.
yeah,
It's a whole all jumble at this point, but yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Okay, Lurker was, yeah, in the Redemption of
yeah.
Time. Um, I also wanted to say one more thing I remember from the short story collections is
Yeah.
because I have no training or no knowledge of like these theoretical physics stuff, right? I don't know. I had no
Hmm.
idea about the heat death of the universe either, right? And that, I think I was only
Yeah.
introduced to this concept during Death's End, from Death's End.
Hmm.
Another short story called, I think, Contraction, in one of the short story collections, talks about the ending of the universe, contraction of the universe, and it's also
Hmm.
so mind blowing. I would highly recommend. Yeah, it's in the whole to hold up the sky. Yeah, it was. And another. Let me look up Liu recently translated
Yeah, I'm gonna look them up.
uh, book is most recently translated one is A View from the Stars. Okay, the whole Hold Up the Sky came out in 2020, and then View from the Stars is out this year. So I haven't read this one, but Hold Up the Sky has really cool stories. Like there's like mind-boggling scale, but also like some humor as well, which I really
Oh, okay.
appreciate. Yeah. So Contraction also, I don't know, I don't want to spoil it, but it's such a mind, and I don't know, I don't want to hype it up too much either. So, but definitely it it talked about a potential ramification of the universe ending, and it's not a long story, but it's such a
Hmm.
beautifully written and such a terrifying concept as well. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, he is predominantly a science fiction writer, but I would argue that he delves into horror
Oh
at
yeah.
some points
Yeah.
because there are some truly. I think Dark Forest more than anything. Dark Forest just has like this looming kind of mystery throughout the entire thing because it essentially starts off pretty early with that because pretty early on you know that the Trisolarans are afraid of something, but you don't know what.
Yeah.
More specifically, they're afraid of Luo Ji, and even he at that point does not know what he possesses that they could be afraid of. That in of itself is so terrifying. And you learn it as it goes. And then Death's End just has some like truly grotesque, like sad thing. Like I'm thinking about like there's too many to count, but like Tian Ming going through everything that he goes
Oh
through,
yeah.
um, and then all of humanity being moved to Australia.
Oh
Like there's some like that.
yeah.
That is like that one. When I read that, I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And then like some of the stuff that Sofan does to those humans and everything. It's so
Hmm.
graphic. And then just seeing humanity spiral, and then and that was the interesting thing too, is because after humanity goes through what it does in Australia, which is pretty horrific. Luckily, I think the ship is called Deep Blue or something
Oh
like
yeah.
that. The
Deep
ship that
Blue. Uh-huh.
yeah, it's going off amongst the stars, and it starts the Dark Forest Protocol, so it saves humanity essentially,
Hmm.
kind of. But it then allows the Trisolarans to move on because they have no choice, and then obviously the Trisolarans are doomed. Um, but then yeah, after that, humanity has they eventually right before that paper slip shows up, humanity basically is in a golden age because they have like all of their um giant space stations now that orbit a bunch of planets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think right before the paper, like right as the paper shows up and everything, Shang Tsung is talking to one of the people she used to know who didn't go into cryosleep, and the guy's basically saying like, for the past 20 years, it's been a golden age, and it's everything's amazing. And then the paper shows up, and it's the most like it's the most horrific like because he doesn't even tell you like you just hear screams of humans over the radio
Yeah.
and stuff like that. It's so frightening and like horrific. And I was on the edge of my seat reading that,
Oh
and
yeah.
then and I'm thinking to myself, even after reading Dark Forest, I was like, how can he make another book? Because Dark Forest, it just ends very like definitively,
Mhm.
where you think it's the end. So I was going into Death's End. I'm like, this is the biggest book out of these three. I'm like, oh, like what else can he do? And the answer is quite a bit because he does so much. And then
Yeah.
Death's End, because after the solar system is flattened and Shinxin and AA are going at the speed of light, I just keep thinking to myself, I'm like, there's like 30 or 50 more pages left. I'm like, what's gonna happen? Like I was just so like, I'm like, where is this going? And then it just goes places I couldn't even have imagined. I just was not expecting um to get so many answers in the end. And they're satisfying answers too.
Yeah.
Because it's like they go faster than light, or I think they go like 1% the speed of light, or something like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So time dilation is still funky because no time at all has passed for them. But then when they get there, it's like 400 years in the future, or something like that.
Yeah, and they're only able to get out of the flattening because of this special ship they have, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they meet Guan Yifan, and he actually gives them good news, basically saying like the Deep Blue ship was able to get to a new solar system, and now humanity is like a space sparing species, and they still live and everything. Um, and so all of that was just awesome. Like just hearing that, the fact that humanity made it and they survived essentially. But then Guan Yufan basically says like, "Oh yeah, that paper thing that they sent, the interdimensional folding thing, it never stops growing. It just keeps growing." And I'm like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, "What?" And then they ask him, "Well, how are you so like calm about it?" And he's like, "Well, it's going to take it like millions and millions of years to even reach us. So you might as well live in the moment." Um, so it's just a lot of stuff packed into those last few pages.
Yeah, and I remember uh, when there was like a group of children that they had to like save. Uh, AA makes them makes them do like math problems, and then literally
Oh
picks up
yeah, that's right.
such
Yeah,
a weird way to. And she later rationalizes it by saying like, oh, it's the I think Liu Cixin makes allusions to the cold equation, like that, if I'm not mistaken, that Twilight Zone episode where there's like not enough air for all crew members of this spaceship, so one of them has to space themselves or something.
that's a deep cut.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
So it
know
was,
exactly what you're
yeah.
talking about. Yeah.
It was just terrifying to think like if you're dumb, or even if you're just like not focused enough at that moment
Hmm.
where everything around you is just being destroyed, or
Yeah.
if you're not able to answer correctly for that question for that stranger lady, you're just
Yeah.
like left to die.
I would have died because I
Oh,
probably would not have. I would not have
me
got that right.
too, me too.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, the fine and another example I remembered when you mentioned that the darkness of Sishin's um, stories is the also like a very catch 22 or very desperate position that these two ships, I think one was Deep Blue, the one that survives, and the
Yeah.
other was like the other ship, right? They were both desperate, and then there were four ships, and then one destroyed the two, but couldn't destroy the third because they had the shield on at the last minute, right? There was such
Or they
this,
attacked first, I
or
think.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's how Liu Ji, to him, that kind of like that's the final confirmation that the Dark Forest theory is real.
yeah, yeah, very, yeah,
Um, yeah.
such so weird. Yeah, and if you do, if you a lot of the short stories of nutrition that I've read are about first contact specifically.
Oh,
So humanity is meeting these different, weirdly different aliens. Like one of them is just straight up dinosaurs that came back after. I think that part I can spot. It's just so silly. It's
Wait, Sishin Liu wrote
Yeah,
these?
yeah. So
Or oh, okay.
it's I think it's in the Wandering Earth collection. So these
Oh,
dinosaurs
okay.
come back and says, like, we're back. We were gone like several million years ago in this nuclear fusion device, but we can't progress above that. Like we can't progress further than nuclear fusion, but we still eat humans and stuff. It's so funny. And there's another short story connected to that one. I think it's called Poets something. I think it's the last story in Hold Up the Sky. Those two are so fun. And yeah, and the Wandering Earth, they made a movie about it, right? They made, I think, two movies about it. That's also
Yeah.
such a great novella. It can easily be seen as both like a dystopian novella, but there's also very Shakespearean aspect to it as well. It's almost reads like a play, drama, theater play as well. I don't know. Yeah.
My God, you're getting me excited.
Yeah.
I thank God it's summer so I can actually catch up on this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What is the name of his short story collection that has like the alien? Because I'm looking him up right now because I'm
Okay.
just so fascinated.
Sure. So, The Wandering Earth and Other Stories, I think is the name.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and Hold Up the Sky. These are the um, ones. I think there might be another short story collection that I'm missing, but these two are definitely really good to come to mind. And then there are these novels or novellas, Ball Lightning and Supernova Era. They're really good as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. I'm gonna have to. I guess I know what I'm doing this summer because I'm excited because I obviously really like his writing style.
Uh huh.
So
Oh
I
yeah.
uh, I want to read more.
Yeah. You won't be disappointed. It's really good. And yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, well, I this is definitely shaping up to be. This might be the longest episode I've done, which is obviously a good thing because we had a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on, or because I know we touched on a lot.
No, I think we said quite enough.
Yeah,
But this was fun though. This was really fun.
this is a lot of fun, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we can do another one on something else someday.
Sure.
Um, I before we end
Uh
though, I
huh.
just want to say thanks so much, my friend, for
No, thank
coming
you.
on. And this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I had a blast.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm really glad. We got to like talk about not just for this podcast. Like we got to talk about our shared love of sci-fi and stuff. And I think
Yeah.
we can talk about like other sci-fi stuff as well.
Hmm.
I'm right now I'm reading this novel called The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor.
Oh,
It's
I
really
need to look
fun.
that.
It's really fun. And then yeah, like there are other stuff that we can talk about as well. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely. I've definitely got some ideas for that. Oh, the Mountain in the Sea. That's with the octopi,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's yeah. I've heard of that. Um, yeah, you're getting me excited about that too.
Yeah.
Um, but no, yeah, seriously, man. Thanks so much. This was a blast. Thank you so much for your unique perspective and your amazing knowledge on all of this. I really hope the audience really appreciated it. Hopefully, we didn't bore you with our fascination with this, but I don't know how you could be bored because when you have two people that are this passionate about something talking about it, um, hopefully there was something exciting about it. I know there was for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks again so much, man, and thank you to the listeners. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.